On the night I planned to propose to my girlfriend in front of our families, I walked backstage and found her making out with my best friend, the same man helping me plan the entire surprise. When I confronted them, they laughed and called me pathetic. But months later, when their world collapsed, they came crawling back, begging for mercy I no longer had. The applause from the hall was still ringing in my ears when I stepped backstage, clutching the velvet box that held the ring. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from the anticipation of asking her to be mine forever. I had imagined this moment countless times. Her smile, the tears in her eyes, the way our families would cheer. But instead of joy, I was met with a sight that shattered me. My girlfriend locked in an embrace with my best friend, the very man who had helped me plan this night. Their laughter filled the room, cruel and careless, as if my dreams were nothing more than a joke. In that instant, the perfect evening I had built collapsed into ashes. I froze at the doorway, unable to move, unable to breathe. The decorations I had carefully chosen, the flowers, the lights, the music, all blurred into the background. My eyes were fixed on them, tangled together, their whispers punctuated by laughter. It wasn't just betrayal. It was mockery staged in the very place where I had planned to change our lives forever. The ring in my pocket felt heavier than iron. I had spent months saving for it, working late nights, skipping meals, sacrificing small joys, all for the promise of this one evening. I wanted her to feel cherished, to know that she was my world. And now, watching her with him, I realized she had never seen me that way. I stepped forward, my shoes scraping against the floor. They turned, startled, but only for a heartbeat. Then came the smirk, the kind of smirk that strips you of dignity. My best friend, the man I had trusted with my secrets, adjusted his shirt casually, as though being caught in betrayal was nothing more than an inconvenience. "You weren't supposed to see that," she said, her tone sharp, almost annoyed. "But maybe it's better this way. Saves us the embarrassment." Embarrassment. That word echoed in my head like a cruel bell. I had imagined embarrassment as fumbling my words during the proposal, or dropping the ring box in front of everyone. Never had I imagined embarrassment as discovering the woman I loved in the arms of my closest friend. I swallowed hard, my voice trembling. "I trusted you," I said, looking at him. "You were supposed to be my brother. And you," I turned to her, my chest tightening, "you were supposed to be my future." They exchanged a glance, then burst into laughter. Not nervous laughter. Not guilty laughter. Mocking laughter. "You're pathetic," he said, shaking his head. "You thought she actually wanted your little fairy tale proposal? Look at yourself. You're a joke." Her words followed like poison. "You can't even see how ridiculous you are. Planning some grand show thinking you're special. You're not. You're nothing." The cruelty of their voices cut deeper than the betrayal itself. I felt stripped bare, humiliated in a way that words could never fully capture. The decorations around me, once symbols of love, now looked like props in a cruel play. I turned away, forcing myself to walk back toward the hall. My family was waiting, their faces lit with expectation, unaware of the storm that had just shattered me. I couldn't let them see. I couldn't let them know that the moment they had come to witness had already been destroyed. I slipped out quietly, avoiding their eyes, pretending I needed air. Outside, the night was cold, the stars blurred by the tears I refused to let fall. I sat alone on a bench, gripping the ring box so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every memory replayed in my mind. The first time she smiled at me, the nights we spent dreaming about the future, the promises whispered in the dark. All of it felt like lies now, carefully crafted illusions meant to keep me blind. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. I didn't return to the hall. I couldn't. Instead, I wandered through the empty streets, the sound of their laughter still echoing in my ears. I questioned everything, my worth, my choices, the very idea of love. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted them so completely? At one point, I pulled out the ring and opened the box. The diamond sparkled under the streetlight, mocking me with its beauty. I thought about throwing it away, letting it disappear into the darkness. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was anger, maybe it was the faint hope that one day this ring would mean something different. I slipped it back into my pocket and kept walking. My phone buzzed with messages from family members asking where I was, but I ignored them. I couldn't face their questions, their concern. Not tonight. Tonight I was broken and I needed to be alone with the pieces of myself that remained. By the time I reached home, the sky was already turning pale with dawn. I collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word they had said. Pathetic. Nothing. Those words carved themselves into me, but beneath the pain, a spark of something else began to grow. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. It was something darker, something sharper. I realized then that this night would not define me as a victim. It would define me as someone who had been betrayed, humiliated, and broken, but not destroyed. And though I didn't know how yet, I knew one thing with certainty. They would regret underestimating me. The morning after that night, I woke with the weight of silence pressing down on me. My phone buzzed with unanswered messages, but I couldn't bring myself to reply. Meals became rituals of quiet. Fork scraping against plate, the taste of food dull, my appetite gone. I sat across from family members who asked gentle questions, and I forced a smile, pretending everything was fine. Inside though, I was unraveling. Nights stretched endlessly, my mind replaying their laughter, their words, until sleep became a stranger. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how long it would take before the ache in my chest loosened its grip. Days blurred together, each one heavy with the burden of pretending. At work, I kept my head down, answering emails, attending meetings, nodding at conversations I barely heard. Colleagues noticed my quietness, but no one pressed too hard. I clung to routine: wake, work, eat, sleep, as if structure alone could hold me together. Yet even in that monotony, small cracks of light began to appear. A stranger at the coffee shop complimented my tie one morning, and though it was a simple gesture, it reminded me that kindness still existed. On another day, during a walk through the park, I watched children chase each other across the grass, their laughter pure and untainted. For a moment I felt something stir inside me, something that whispered life could still be beautiful. I began to lean into these small moments. I took longer walks, letting the rhythm of my footsteps steady my thoughts. I started journaling late at night, pouring out words I couldn't say aloud. Writing became a release, a way to untangle the knots inside me. Slowly I realized that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about finding strength in unexpected places. One evening I joined a local community class, something I had always brushed aside before. It was a simple cooking workshop, but standing in that kitchen surrounded by strangers, I felt a spark of belonging. A woman beside me laughed when I spilled flour across the counter, and her laughter wasn't cruel. It was warm, genuine. We talked as we cooked, and for the first time in weeks I felt seen without judgment. That night I walked home with a lighter heart, realizing that new connections could mend the cracks left by betrayal. As weeks passed, I met more people. Neighbors I had barely spoken to before, colleagues who invited me to lunch, acquaintances who became friends. Each conversation reminded me that my value wasn't defined by those who had mocked me. I began to see myself through their eyes. Capable, resilient, worthy of respect. The more I opened up, the more I discovered that life could move forward, even after heartbreak. I also rediscovered parts of myself I had long ignored. Music, for instance. I dusted off my old guitar, its strings stiff from neglect, and began to play again. At first, my fingers stumbled, but soon melodies filled the room, carrying away the heaviness. Painting followed. I bought a set of brushes and colors, and though my strokes were clumsy, they felt liberating. These passions weren't about perfection. They were about reclaiming joy, about proving to myself that I could create beauty even in the aftermath of pain. Confidence grew quietly, like a seed pushing through soil. I started volunteering at a local shelter, helping with small tasks, listening to stories from people who had endured far worse. Their resilience inspired me. One man told me how he had rebuilt his life after losing everything, and his words stayed with me. Strength isn't about never breaking. It's about learning how to rise again. I carried that with me, repeating it whenever doubt crept in. Rumors eventually reached me, whispers about my ex and former friend. I heard they were struggling, facing financial troubles, arguments, and the same arrogance that had once fueled their laughter now tearing them apart. People asked if I felt vindicated, if I wanted to see them fall. But I didn't chase those stories. Revenge wasn't my focus. I had learned that true strength wasn't in watching others collapse. It was in building myself back up. Still, their downfall lingered at the edges of my thoughts, not as a source of joy, but as a reminder of how fragile arrogance can be. I chose to keep my distance, to let their struggles remain theirs. My path was different now. I was preparing for something greater, something that didn't rely on their pain but on my own growth. Every day became a step forward. Silent meals turned into shared dinners with friends. Sleepless nights gave way to evenings filled with music and laughter. The heavy burden of pretending began to lift, replaced by authenticity. I no longer hid my scars. I wore them as proof of survival. And though the memory of betrayal still lingered, it no longer defined me. I was no longer the man broken on that bench, clutching a ring that symbolized shattered dreams. I was someone stronger, someone who had picked up the pieces and built something new. The quiet strength I had built within myself carried me through the months that followed. My life had begun to feel steady again, filled with new routines, new faces, and a sense of independence I hadn't known before. Then one evening, as I sat in a cafe with a book in hand, I overheard a conversation at the next table. Their names, my ex and my former friend, slipped into the air like ghosts. I froze, listening as strangers spoke of their downfall. Financial troubles, arguments, betrayal between them. The arrogance that once made them laugh at me was now tearing them apart. At first I felt nothing. No joy, no pity. Just a strange calm, as though the universe had quietly balanced the scales. But the calm didn't last. Days later I received a message. Her name lit up my phone, a name I hadn't seen in months. My chest tightened as I read the words. "Can we talk? Please." I ignored it. Yet more messages followed, each more desperate than the last. Then came his call. His voice, once dripping with mockery, now trembled with fear. "I need your help," he said. "Everything's falling apart. I don't know where else to turn." I agreed to meet them, not out of kindness but curiosity. I wanted to see them face to face, to measure the distance between who I had been and who I had become. We met at a small diner, the kind with flickering neon lights and cracked leather booths. They arrived together, but they looked nothing like the confident pair I had once caught backstage. Their clothes were worn, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. She avoided my gaze, fiddling with her hands. He tried to smile, but it faltered quickly. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. I leaned back, arms crossed, letting the silence stretch. Finally he spoke. "We made mistakes. Big ones. I know we hurt you. But we're drowning. We thought maybe you could forgive us. Maybe even help us." The words hung in the air, heavy and awkward. I studied them, remembering the laughter, the humiliation, the way they had stripped me of dignity. And now here they were, stripped of their own. "Help you," I said quietly. "After everything?" She looked up, tears brimming. "We were wrong. I was wrong. I thought I knew what I wanted, but I didn't. I see it now. You were the one who truly cared." Her voice cracked, but I felt no sympathy. I remembered the way she had called me nothing, the way he had sneered at my dreams. "I don't hate you," I said, my tone calm, steady. "But I don't owe you anything. Not forgiveness. Not help. Not even my time." He leaned forward, desperation spilling from him. "Please. We've lost everything. The business failed. Friends turned their backs. We're alone. You don't understand how bad it is." I met his eyes, and for the first time he looked small. The arrogance was gone, replaced by fear. "I do understand," I replied. "Bez, I've been there. I know what it feels like to be broken. But the difference is I rebuilt myself. You chose to tear yourselves apart." Silence followed. She wiped her eyes and he slumped back, defeated. I stood, placing a few bills on the table for my coffee. "I wish you well," I said simply. "But I won't be part of your story anymore." Their voices rose behind me as I walked out. "Please. Don't leave us like this." But I didn't turn back. The night air was cool, and with each step I felt lighter. That moment wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about reclaiming the power they had once stolen from me. I realized that true victory wasn't in watching them collapse. It was in walking away with dignity, knowing I had built a life they could no longer touch. In the weeks that followed, I heard more rumors. Their relationship ended in bitterness, each blaming the other. They moved from place to place, searching for stability they couldn't find. And though people asked if I felt satisfaction, I only smiled. My peace didn't come from their suffering. It came from my freedom. I poured my energy into the life I had built. Work flourished, friendships deepened, passions grew. The ring I had once hidden away found a new meaning, not as a symbol of loss but as a reminder of resilience. I kept it, not to mourn what had been but to honor the strength I had gained. One evening as I played my guitar by the window, I thought back to that night of betrayal. The laughter, the humiliation, the pain, it all seemed distant now, like a storm that had passed. What remained was clarity. I had been tested, broken, and rebuilt. And in the end I had won, not by destroying them but by refusing to let them destroy me. I walked away with dignity, leaving them to face the consequences of their choices. And in that choice I found peace. My revenge was not in cruelty but in living a better life without them.